Raising funding, especially in the pandemic, has been a huge challenge. It's completely different than what you're used to. Everything is remote. There's no in-person meetings. It's been quite different, but it's been an awesome experience. I really enjoyed doing it. It's almost more efficient because you don't have to travel to each location where all these investors are. Now you can kind of stay in your office, in your home, be able to talk to 10, 20 really interesting companies that are potentially good partners for you. And do so in a more efficient way almost. What's been really exciting is that it's been great to be able to share my story, share the story of our company, being able to grow so quickly with so many different unique investors that also bring their own insights and ability to help us grow to these meetings. And what's been really exciting is that we raised our Series A about 4 months ago. We were able to raise $160 million to fund our vision. What's even more exciting is that round was oversubscribed by 300%. So right now we're actually in the process of raising our Series B, and yeah, everything is going super quickly, and it's just really exciting.
Raising capital has been the least favorite part of my job, if I'm going to be honest, and I think that is very prominent again amongst founders. So fundraising was very hard. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, and especially one, we're female founders, two, we're underrepresented minority founders, three, we're selling dresses, which doesn't really resonate with a lot of predominantly male VCs in Silicon Valley. So we've definitely got a lot of pushback in the very beginning. We were raising a small round for a pre-seed, and we've always gotten a lot of backhanded comments of oh, this industry is not big enough, this market's too small, who really buys dresses, how many times do people buy dresses, or are dresses really over $100? So we've gotten those, and we've even gotten things that were very judgy, and we've gotten asked oh, who built your app for you? When me and my co-founder are sitting there, and my co-founder is fully technical. She's a software engineer from Pinterest, and she built everything herself. So which is very, very impressive. But still, their assumption is that because we're women, we're female founders, that we didn't build our app, that we're not technical. So it was definitely a struggle. Every single meeting we walked into, whether it's in person or Zoom, we had to make sure we brought our A++ game. We had to prove ourselves so much more than our male founder counterparts. And even, for me, I went to Berkeley, my co-founder went to Penn. These are great schools. We've worked at Uber, Facebook, and Pinterest, great companies. Still isn't enough when we bring up, hey, we used to do pageants. Hey, we're tackling the dress industry. It's almost as if those facts, those statements about what our business is, completely obliterate everything that we've kind of worked hard for and everything that we are. So credentials almost don't matter as much for female founders. That's what I've noticed. It's good that we had them because it would have been a lot worse if we did not. And so I think that we just have to work twice, 3 times as hard as male founders in this industry.
I'm in a super capital intensive industry where constantly you have to raise capital. Everything, down from the service network we have to build out to, millions of dollars in tooling and equipment for our manufacturing line is so capital intensive that you have to be able to get ahead of that, especially to remain competitive and to succeed. So definitely capital is a challenge. Making sure we had a product market fit was a challenge. Making sure we had the right partners was a huge challenge, because you want to be careful with who you work with, as much as, what you're building or what market you're in. Raising capital is absolutely exhausting. You're constantly selling yourself, right? When you're a founder, you're selling your customers, you're selling your investors, you're selling your team, right? In some common vision. I'm super fortunate that we have amazing investors with very long-term time horizon that really get it. But having to pitch and constantly, right, answer questions and be challenged, right? It toughens you, but it's definitely a challenging thing to do.
So our fundraising today has happened very quickly. I think as a byproduct of pivoting, in a global pandemic and living in a remote world. I didn't get the chance to get to know investors as deeply as I might have in a non-remote world. And what I think that forced is a whole lot of trust, right? Trust from the investors that someone who they met 6 days ago is, worthy of millions of dollars, and trust from me that someone I met 6 days ago can have voting power in this company, right? And is someone who I want to represent and, embody real to the public. That hasn't been natural for me. I think I really like deeply getting to know folks and haven't gotten that opportunity. I haven't even met them in person to this day, right? So all to say, it has been an experience that asks for a whole lot of trust.
For fundraising, initially it was pretty difficult because I was mostly an outsider in tech. So it took we went to Accelerator, met some people, went back to LA, got more familiar with the LA ecosystem, and eventually met a couple angel investors. But even before then, my parents and my best friend actually wrote their first check into the company. My parents used their own savings. My best friends used all of what he had and wrote a $300,000 check together into the company to get us started. And then it got easier from there as we can prove out based on our financials and our product, we have more to show.
We were at this point where we were getting further and further behind on orders, where we just could not place the orders far enough in advance and everything like that. So we were very aware that we were holding the company back, that Levi and Robbie were holding this company back from the potential it could achieve. So it was that realization that we knew that we had to go and find another partner to complement us, because we had two great skill sets, but we lacked the massive amount of capital in order to really pour the gasoline on this. First, we just engaged with an investment banking group to help us run a process. That was a ton of fun. We kind of got to be like the belle of the ball because we had a ton of growth. So when we first did that, there was just so much demand, and we really got to be picky with who we chose to work with. And we really wanted to find someone that looked at the way we were doing business kind of in the same light.
I'm not going to lie to you, it's definitely not butterflies and rainbows. In my book, I have a page on what it's like to be on that path, and it's like a little gold road. Focusing on the process is like one of the most important things, because it can be really hard to be in this time period for like an extended amount of time. Focusing on the process, the outcomes will come. Focus on building great relationships that will be around for decades. I think that's been really important to us. So community first, and thinking long term have been like the things that I've learned through this process.
We've raised about $38 million to date, about $11 million seed, another $27 million Series A. We had a relatively easy time, I would say, raising the seed. Because I was fortunate, I was already in Silicon Valley. Once people got excited about the idea, it's taken years and years of insight and thinking about aging to kind of understand all the pieces that need to come together and why explicitly I'm working on the aging problem this way. And it's very hard to communicate in a 30-minute pitch, right? So you have to believe that you can build a dog aging drug, that it's $1 billion market, that this is the best way to get to human aging drugs, that there's an aging drug for human markets, and that I can do it, right? I think another thing I really learned was how to pattern match well to what competence looks like in those fields. So the seed was really kind of a test of learning how to do that and learning how to seem competent. The Series A was another test in terms of doing that, but for a different audience, in addition to like really well communicating the path to what I'm trying to build. Which what I'm trying to build is an aging company, right? So it's a long path, and not something that people have thought about before. And there's no objective metrics to say if we're successful or not. So really, have to convince people that I'm competent and my team's competent and that we can execute.
When we initially started Spekit, I started with my co-founder. We used to work together, so she'd seen the problem firsthand. And we initially decided to just raise capital from friends and family. So we raised a little over $300,000, and we thought that we would eventually just launch the product, bring it to market, and bootstrap it in some ways. What we realized, though, is that we're competing in a space where other players, other competitors have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and we simply weren't going to be able to compete without some capital. With that said, in our broad space, we're the only female-founded company, which I didn't realize until after we started the company. And generally speaking, in enterprise tech, there are still very few female CEOs. Luckily, we're starting to see it more in consumer tech, but with that, it was a pretty intimidating experience at first. I had to unlearn some of the more masculine traits that I'd really adopted working in real estate and financial tech, and instead really lean into like what would make me unique as an entrepreneur, because I knew that investors weren't used to seeing founders that looked like me or that looked like my co-founder. And so, at first it was a challenge really figuring out, not just what is the process of raising capital, but how do I stand out? How do I really sell that vision and stay true and authentic to who I am and the feminine leadership that I feel strongly called towards? So luckily we found some incredible investors. We've raised $15 million to date, and on our way to raise a lot more here soon.
We've raised about $70 million today. When you really need money, you can't raise money, and when you don't need money, money gets thrown at you. It's sort of the dynamic, which is a terrible dynamic to be in as an entrepreneur, because in the early days, my co-founder and I, we bootstrapped it. And then we went to Y Combinator, and then we raised our seed, our A and our B within 8 months during the pandemic. So it was about $70 million in about 8 months, and it's easy when you have a good business, but again, we didn't need the money after we did Y Combinator, and so it just became easier. And which is an oxymoron. You think the larger the check size, the larger the round, the harder it is to raise. It hasn't been our experience so far. We also have a great business, and so that helps, but it's been easier.